We'll start with the breaking news this afternoon at Dundalk, Daniel, that Shane Keegan's quit his post as manager. The Lily Whites playing St Pat's at 6 o'clock this evening in the League of Ireland Premier Division at Oriel Park. Filippo Giovagnoli doesn't have the coaching qualification, so he had this unusual arrangement where Shane Keegan was the nominal manager, but not a traditional manager where he'd be the ultimate caller of all the shots. I think it possibly was a position for Shane that became untenable.
Yeah, I think you'd be right there, John, to be honest. I know we would have spoken about this a couple of weeks ago, probably at the start of the season. And, my sense always was, listen, if things started well, maybe this wouldn't be that much of a talking point. But obviously things haven't started very well at all. And it's been strange. You have a situation elsewhere in the league where Stephen O'Donnell, for example, at St Pat's doesn't have the pro license, but he's very much out front. Like, he's doing all the press conferences. He's the manager in all but name, and you can debate various ways of approaching it. But Dundalk seem to make a big song and dance of going out of their way to say no. Like, Filippo isn't really the manager. Yet you go to the games, and it's obviously very clear who the main voice was. And I mean, the Bows game last week in particular, it was sort of comical. I mean, as far as I understand, I think Filippo was told he had to go into the stand, but like from the stand he was making substitutes down onto the pitch, and you could see that it seemed to be, I don't know, you got the sense that Shane Keegan on the touchline wasn't necessarily sure what was coming from behind him. I'm sure he'd have his own say on that in due course, but that was the way it looked. And I think it was an uncomfortable one for him. He was out doing press conferences before and after every game, talking about sort of some questionable, I suppose, decisions, you could say, and putting his sort of stamp on the answers. But you kind of know that this, at best, like, this is someone who's been part of a consultation process of this, but deep down you sort of got the feeling that really you're explaining someone else's decisions, and there's just a lot going on off the pitch up there, really. There seems to be, last weekend there was strong suggestions after the Bows game that actually Filippo, that the two Italians were going to go. But it seems like the chairman is quite keen on them staying. And clearly Shane has decided to leave now. And yeah, I think it would be fair to say, I'm sure, listen, he has a media presence, so I'm sure in due course, he'll be able to come and speak about it all. But I think it was a very uncomfortable arrangement for him, probably from the start. And it's no surprise to me, really, that this has happened, I have to say. Maybe the timing is a surprise, but in a way, nothing should surprise you with that club at the moment.
Norwich as well promoted back to the Premier League, with Brentford and Swansea only drawing today, so congratulations to the Canaries. What's Jim Magilton's role there? Because he came into the club as well not too long ago, Daniel.
Yeah, so Jim Magilton's title is sporting director, so it's, it's sporting director. It can be, in some other places it's director of football. It's that sort of role that, in theory, Shane Keegan at the press conference, he did his weekly press conference the other day, said that, Magilton would be the link between the dressing room and the ownership in the States. But again, all the indications are that the chairman in America remains very influential in terms of decisions that are made. And I think the expectation was that Jim Magilton was being hired to make these decisions that effectively, when it came to maybe hiring and firing and the management of the management team and stuff like that Jim Magilton say would probably be final. It does appear from all the soundings out that's probably not the case at the moment. And maybe, maybe in time there may be a change of management team completely, and maybe that will be Jim Magilton's appointment, and maybe that's how things begin to work. But I don't know. It's definitely not working out the way things had intended. And without going down a sort of a rabbit hole, because it's quite a dense story for people to get into, like, Jim Magilton went in there around the time where a lot of off the field staff at the club have left. People are sort of in sort of general management positions. Administration, office administration, stuff like that. So in theory, Jim Magilton was being brought in to professionalise aspects of the club. But in practice, as far as I know, he was he was bogged down in like licensing and paperwork and office admin and all this type of stuff that really at another club like a sporting director wouldn't be doing that. But of course, this was the mad thing about Shane Keegan being presented as the manager at that time. I mean, Shane Keegan wasn't not on the training pitch for the first couple of weeks in pre-season. He was back in the office doing office stuff to fill the gaps for people that have left. For whatever reason, over the last year or so, a lot of people have decided or have left that club in a really like sort of consistent way. There's been a steady stream of people departing, which I think has a lot of people reasonably quite worried about where things are going there, because like it's almost surreal to be talking about it. Like, this is a club that has won 5 league titles since 2014. It's been in the Europa League group stages twice. Was, I suppose, the dominant power in the league and had the power, financial power, there's no doubt. Like, it is very wealthy people behind the club, has the financial power, absolutely no doubt, to really be a real dominant force. And I think a lot of clubs in the League of Ireland couldn't compete with them in a lot of ways, and probably can't believe really that they've imploded themselves without any real pressure from outside forcing it. And it just does appear really that they've ended up in a situation where I suppose the main voice of the club, and they will say, well, listen, they're putting money in, they're entitled to do what they want to do, etc. But they don't know football, and they've allowed something that was pretty strong and pretty impressive to disintegrate. And honestly, all these comings and goings, they just add up to a big long list of dramas that anyone who's around, like, people that are around the sort of football in Ireland, they all know the stories that are going around. They're not surprised by this. I think externally, there's always a surprise when something happens. But all this stuff has been coming. It's been flagged for some time. And yeah, like appointments like bringing in Magilton, for example, was viewed as, okay, maybe this might steady the ship a bit, but it hasn't changed the ultimate issue, which would be, it's not functioning as a club should. For example, like I did a podcast during the week with Pat Fenlon, who would have been at Shelbourne at the time of Ollie Byrne, who everyone knew Ollie Byrne in Irish football, an amazing character, a colourful character, and would have got into sort of various scraps with authority and with the FAI and whatever. But Pat Fenlon was quite clear and said whatever about that, he always knew the boundaries of the dressing room and not to let any of those quirks sort of seep in to that environment. That's what's happened with Dundalk. And it's very hard to get that back when it happens.
You can only be one voice, Stephen Elliott. Simple as that.
Yeah, again, listen to Dan speaking there about the club. Like, from the outside looking in at Dundalk, this season it's an absolute mess, if I'm honest. Like, I think they picked up 1 point, and obviously the talk about who's managing the team and the whole setup. There must be more to it, I presume. I presume we'll hear it in due course of how it's come to this situation. But the fact, like, I know Filippo came in last year and he done okay in Europe as well. He got a bit of a run going, but I don't know. It's one of them where you're thinking the League of Ireland is a league where I think you need to know the league to be successful in it. And listen, hindsight's a lovely thing. You look at when Vinnie Peart was in there. I know he kind of went through a tough spell last season when they eventually got rid of him. But in hindsight, it would have been a good idea maybe to keep him in there and let him turn things around himself, because he probably would have known better than anybody what was needed. And again, we're talking about ifs and buts here, but again, this season to pick up 1 point. I've watched some of the games this year on the League of Ireland Watch, and it's like watching a different club altogether. And yeah, I'm sure the other teams in the league are happy because it kind of creates a little bit more of an open race for accolades this season. But no, from an outside point of view looking in, Dundalk were a powerhouse, and all of a sudden now they're kind of, even Cork City being in the fourth division. Like, who would have thought that a few years ago, that Cork City would have been in the fourth division, and Dundalk sitting on 1 point after 4 games. It just shows you how football can change and swing so quickly.
I think the fear, and like, I've had some sort of correspondence with people around this. Like, I think by all accounts, at the end of, say, Vinnie Peart's time, like, I don't think the morale and everything was very good around the place, because I think it had been worn down by some of the interference which had started. I think it got to the stage where they probably did need the change at that time, right? And they got a short-term boost out of it, by all accounts, because they have the new management team come in who had the full support of the owners, which was grand until they started to get bad results, and then all of a sudden they've become prey. So you're almost getting to the stage where you're thinking, like, is any management team ever really going to be able to be successful in that environment that's there? Because I think at the time when the change was made last year, I would have been speaking to a lot of players and people around. They felt, no, listen, the mood was really bad and they probably needed some kind of change, right? But in hindsight, you look at it and think, can any management team succeed when they have something hanging over them that has the potential to be to cause a degree of instability? And that's the problem. And like, maybe the players don't always see the pressure that the managers maybe are under, because they're dealing with it all the time, and maybe then they'd lost their relationship with that management team because, like there was layers to it. And I think that's the fear for everyone there, that there maybe isn't a manager there that can fix it.
Well, I think
that's the issue.
Looking at the performances, I think it is affecting the team, the whole mess.
Oh, it is, yeah.
They, watching them play, like Dundalk, especially that season when I played in the league and when they were successful, you played against them, they were sharp, they were stronger than everybody else, they knew exactly what they were about. You're watching them now and they do look a little bit kind of unsure of formation-wise where they need to be. They lack that little bit of sharpness compared to some of the teams that you probably wouldn't say probably even train as much as them. And that all stems from like the mess that's happening above. And for that news to come out today right before a game, it's just, again, it just adds to the kind of the craziness, because it's a big game today, this evening for them. Like, they need to start picking up results, because you still look at the squad of players they have, kind of player for player, you'd still say they're one of the strongest squads on paper. So again, the players need to find a way, although they're a little bit unsure who's running things. As a player, you need to find a way sometimes amongst yourselves to get results, because I'm sure they'll have pride as well. They'll want to win some games, because you don't want to be losing every week, because it becomes very difficult then to turn that around.
Yeah, I think it's like one thing. Sorry, John. I think it's one, like, I mean, this is just to put it in perspective for people. I mean, this is probably like the spending on that Dundalk squad is up there with the spending on any squad in League of Ireland history. It's well up there. There was a lot of in the mid 2000s there would have been some pretty high wage bills and amounts of money sent out. But my understanding of recent years now, in fairness, some of the payments they would have made would have been bonuses for like Europa League. In fairness, they got £3 million. For getting into the Europa League only a couple of months ago. And to be fair, I have no problem with players who contribute to that, getting substantial bonuses and stuff for it. But it does appear that they have paid a lot of money at that club, and as a result, I think there's players on particularly good contracts. They have a player arriving in the next couple of days. He's in quarantine at the moment. He's in hotel quarantine. Or no, he's not in hotel quarantine. Sorry, he's just in the quarantine. This guy, his name is Wilfred Sahibo, who a couple of years ago was on the MLS team of the season. Like, he's played with Valencia, and again, apparently he's coming in on proper money for League of Ireland standards. Really, really good money. And it's not just a case that like they're back. It's a team that's 1 point from 4, having a bad start to the season. Like, they're miles behind teams that probably have a wage bill that's like a third or a quarter of their size. Like, it's to talk about underperformance. It's staggering. And to be fair, I think everyone acknowledges that it's probably been, it's been Filippo's team in terms of decisions that have been made. Some of the tactical stuff and some of the decisions in recent weeks has been very bizarre. Really, really bizarre. And hence there's scrutiny coming on them, understandably so. But clearly there's a whole power struggle behind the scenes that probably is complicating things for everyone too. And I think to be honest, from Shane's perspective, I think he was probably a front man for it. But I'd say it's difficult to try and be that if you're not necessarily you're not really making any of the the big decisions yourself. Like, there was a meeting, I think last Sunday in the club. I think it was between like the Filippo and Giuseppe, the two Italians, and the players. Like that. There's all these little factions and stuff which aren't conducive. But yeah, listen. Unfortunately, I fear that this one is going to rumble on.
Do they need to get another front man though? Is that not the problem with the no license?
Well, yeah, I don't know I'm not at the game this evening, so I'm not I'm not there, I suppose, figuring out what they need to do. There is a 60-day dispensation that can be there to operate without it. But there's a lot of I can't imagine, but I don't like to say something without having looked it up and knowing. I'm not sure if Filippo can become that 60-day person again. But they do have Jim Magilton there, who's managed at a very high level and, you know, has a pro license and is very well qualified. But he was emphatic a couple of weeks ago. He actually, at the press conference, I asked, would we see you involved? And he said at the time, there's more chance of me being on the bench this season than him. Now, I'm not there tonight. So if Jim pops up, you know, already in the short space of time, that prediction hasn't lived up. Like, they might have to do that, or they may have to, as you sort of allude to there, John, you know, find someone else. But I think when there's pressure on, like, if they got a bad result tonight, like, for example, in the next couple of games, that will fall on the Italians, I think, and then it might just be a case that a whole new management team would come in if the chairman permits it.